The night has already settled over the city when you find yourself walking along a quiet Roman street, where the last traces of the day linger only as a memory in the stone and in the faint warmth still breathing out of the walls. The noise that once filled these spaces, voices, cart wheels, the call of vendors, has thinned into almost nothing, leaving behind a soft hush that seems to stretch from one corner of the city to another. The air has cooled, but not sharply. It carries the gentle aftermath of the hours of sunlight, like a stone that has held warmth all day and now slowly releases it back into the darkness. Above you, the sky is a deep, velvety blue, not completely black, a color that feels almost like dyed cloth spread overhead. A few early stars have already appeared, tiny points of silver embedded in that heavy fabric of night, while thin veils of clouds drift lazily across, faint and almost transparent. Somewhere far off, you hear a dog bark once, the sound carrying through the still air, then fading quickly, swallowed by the silence that follows. There is no urgency in that sound, no alarm, just a brief statement of existence in a city that is gradually falling asleep. Your footsteps along the stone pavement are quiet, the soles of your sandals touching and leaving the ground with a soft, regular rhythm. The worn stones feel solid, familiar, their irregular surfaces smoothed by countless feet before yours. You notice how the faint moisture of night air has begun to gather in the shallow dips of the paving stones, making them cool to the touch, though not slick. Each step is unhurried, as if the night itself has placed a hand on your shoulder, guiding you with a slow, reassuring pressure, reminding you that there is no need to rush, that everything important in this hour moves at a gentle pace. The city around you is mostly dark, but not completely. Here and there, small openings in walls glow faintly with lamplight or candlelight from within, creating little islands of gold amidst the quiet gray of stone. An upper window shows a passing shadow as someone moves within their house, finishing some last small task before rest. Another doorway stands half open, letting the smell of cooled cooking fires drift out into the street. The scents are subdued now: baked bread, faint traces of roasted herbs, the clean dryness of dust settling, and they mingle with the neutral, almost comforting smell of stone and worn wood. Ahead of you, down this quiet stretch of street, a modest colonnade rises out of the dimness, its pale columns catching what little light remains from the world above. They stand in a steady row, their surfaces bearing small chips, faint stains, the marks of years and weather, yet they hold themselves with a quiet dignity. Behind the colonnade, partially veiled in shadow, there is a doorway you know well, a doorway that leads into a refuge that exists almost outside of time, a Roman library, a place of shelves and scrolls, of oil lamps and careful hands. This library is not a monumental complex that demands attention from all who pass by. From the street, it appears almost modest, its presence suggested more than announced. Yet to you, the sight of its doorway carries a particular sense of relief, as if the city itself is offering you a sheltered harbor for the night. As you draw closer, you notice the faint, warm glow seeping through small gaps around the door, a gentle golden light that leaks into the street in narrow threads, promising warmth, stillness, and the company of resting knowledge. The air near the building feels different. In the shade that has clung here since late afternoon, the stone is cooler, and the warmth of the day lingers only as a faint echo. You pause just before the entrance, letting your gaze move over the wooden door with its simple iron fittings. The wood is darkened by age and touch, its surface polished smooth in some places by the repeated contact of human hands, worn and slightly rough in others where the grain has opened. Your eyes trace the pattern of knots and lines in the wood, the way light from inside touches the edges of the panels. You lift your hand and rest your palm against the door. The wood feels cool and firm under your skin, with a subtle texture that speaks of years spent facing sun, wind, and rain, and of countless evenings like this one. Your fingers find one of the smoother areas where many hands have pushed before, and for a quiet moment, you simply stand there, hand on the door, breathing slowly in and out, letting the rhythm of your breath match the gradual, unhurried heartbeat of the sleeping city. With a gentle push, you open the door. It yields with a soft, familiar weight, moving along its hinges in a slow arc. As the gap widens, the sounds of the world outside begin to fade, replaced by the muffled, enclosed quiet of the interior. The line of warm light becomes a widening band that spills over your feet, painting the threshold in gold. You step through, leaving behind the open sky and the distant stars, and enter into the library's quiet night. Inside, the vestibule receives you with a calm that feels almost palpable. The walls here are plastered in pale tones, catching and reflecting the gentle light of several small oil lamps placed in niches. Their flames burn low but steady, each one rising from a simple clay or bronze bowl, the wicks feeding slowly on the dark, fragrant oil. Circles of golden light spread around each flame, overlapping and leaving soft, rounded pockets of shadow between them. It is a darkness without threat, more like a deep fold in thick cloth than an empty void. The stone floor beneath your feet is cool and firm. Its surface is worn smooth in the paths most often taken, with faint, shallow dips where countless steps have passed. In places along the walls, the stone still carries a memory of the day's warmth, although it is fading now, draining gradually into the air. Your footsteps make only the quietest of sounds as you move inside, a gently muted contact between sandal and stone that the room absorbs without echo. The air in the vestibule has its own character, distinct from the street outside. It is drier here, tinged with the faint smell of oil lamps, olive oil warmed and turned into light, and with a subtle smokiness from their thin, pale threads of smoke drifting upward. Underneath that, there is another scent, older and deeper, the dry breath of papyrus and parchment coming from the rooms beyond, mixed with the woody scent of shelves and cupboards that have stood for many years. The combination is oddly soothing, like the scent of old wooden chests or a well-used workroom, familiar even if you have never tried to name it before. You let the door fall gently closed behind you. It settles into place with a soft thud, and the faint sounds from outside, the distant bark of a dog, the muffled roll of a wheel, are further softened, nearly erased. The vestibule becomes your entire world for a moment, surrounded by stone and warm light. You stand still, listening. There is almost nothing to hear other than the soft, occasional crackle of a lamp wick and the barely audible rustle of your own clothing when you shift your weight. A simple wooden bench runs along one wall, its surface worn smooth by those who have waited here or paused to adjust their cloaks. In a niche nearby, a single lamp has been placed close to a small decorative relief, its flame casting gentle highlights across carved shapes, perhaps leaves, or a simple pattern of lines. The light turns the shallow carving into something almost living, shadows filling the recessed parts and making them appear deeper. You notice how the lamp's glow touches the edges of the relief, leaving the center in a softer dimness, like a quiet breathing space between brightness and shadow. You take a slow breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs, carrying with it the subtle warmth of the lamps and the dryness of stone. As you breathe out, your shoulders relax a little more. Whatever you carried with you from the day, the thoughts that circled, the questions that lingered, seems to stay a little closer to the door, outside the circle of light in which you stand. Here, the night has a different quality, one that invites you to step further in, to leave the noise and weight of the world at the threshold. Ahead of you, beyond the vestibule, a short corridor leads deeper into the building. It opens through a simple archway, its curve clean and unadorned, leading your eyes to the dim space beyond. The corridor is narrow and low-ceilinged, like a gentle funnel that draws you inward. Lamps are placed at intervals along its length, each one set in a wall bracket or in a small recess, so that the light seems to hover on the plaster surface rather than stand out as a separate object. You step forward, your body already slowing to match the unhurried rhythm of the place. As you move through the archway into the corridor, the floor under your feet changes only slightly, still stone, but with a different pattern of wear, different subtle slopes toward the walls. The stone here has been touched by fewer feet than the entrance, but still enough to bear thin, smooth paths where people walk most often. The edges remain a little rougher, preserving a faint grainy texture. The walls of the corridor are painted in muted, earthy tones, warm ochres, pale browns, and soft creams that catch the lamplight and hold it in a gentle glow. The paint shows signs of age in small cracks that run in thin lines like dried riverbeds across the surface, and in tiny flakes where color has worn away. In some places, the underlying plaster peeks through, a paler shade that blends quietly with the rest. The overall effect is not of decay, but of long, patient use, of a place that has accepted time and grown comfortable with it. As you walk, you pass beneath a small window set high in one wall. It is little more than a slot in the stone, yet it allows a sliver of the night sky to enter, a narrow, cool beam of blue-gray that cuts across the warmer lamplight. Dust motes dance slowly in this strip of light, suspended in the air like tiny, drifting stars. They move so gradually that you might not have noticed them if you hadn't paused for a moment to watch. They rise and fall on currents you cannot feel, turning lazily, catching light in brief, delicate flashes. The air in the corridor feels slightly cooler than in the vestibule, perhaps because of this window, perhaps because of the thickness of the walls. You can feel the gentle contrast on your skin as you pass beneath the shaft of night air from the outside, a faint chill brushing your face and hands, sliding along your arms. It is not unpleasant. If anything, it refreshes you, like stepping briefly into a patch of shade after walking in the sun. Your mind begins to quiet further, matching the narrowing of the corridor and the soft, focused light. The outside world grows distant in your thoughts. You are aware of your feet, one step and then another, the smooth firmness of the stone, the sense of oil and papyrus and ancient wood. Nothing presses on you from ahead. There is no sense of urgency, only a gentle invitation to continue. At the end of the corridor, another archway opens, broader than the first. When you pass through it, the space around you opens up, and you enter the central reading room of the library. The transition feels like stepping out from under a low tree branch into a small clearing, still enclosed, still sheltered, yet more spacious, with room for breath to expand. The room is not vast, but it has a quiet grandeur. Several columns rise from the floor to support a ceiling that arches gently overhead, their surfaces pale in the lamplight. The columns are simple in form, with only modest capitals, but the way they divide the room creates a rhythm, spaces of openness alternating with spaces of shadow. Between them, the lamplight gathers in soft pools, leaving the corners and the upper reaches of the room in a deeper, restful dimness. Along the walls, wooden shelves and cupboards, the armaria, stand in steady ranks. They are made of dark wood, perhaps cypress or another durable kind, their surfaces polished by years of hands and dusting cloths. Their doors stand open here and there, revealing the carefully arranged scrolls within. Some shelves are divided into compartments, each holding a cluster of scrolls lying horizontally, their pale ends facing outward like a row of small moons. Other shelves hold them in looser stacks, tied with cords of different colors that cross their surfaces in simple patterns. The air here is rich with the scent of papyrus, dry and fibrous, mingled with the deeper smell of wood that has absorbed centuries of seasons. It is a kind of dryness that does not scratch the throat. Instead, it feels as though it has been fine-tuned to preserve the fragile materials resting on the shelves. Underneath it all is the faintest trace of incense, perhaps from rituals or offerings made nearby in the past, now only a memory woven into the fabric of the room. In the center of the room and near its sides, wooden tables stand ready for readers. Their surfaces bear marks of long use, tiny cuts, faint stains, slightly darker patches where hands have rested, lighter ones where objects have shielded the wood from sun or soot. The edges of the tables are smoothed by touch, rounded by time. Benches accompany them, solid and simple, with legs that show where they have been moved across the stone floor in small arcs over the years. On one of these tables, an oil lamp burns in a bronze stand. Its base is wide and stable, its slender stem rising to hold a shallow bowl of oil. The flame sways gently, its light spreading over the grain of the wood, over a few scrolls that lie nearby, and over a wax tablet that rests slightly askew. The surface of the oil in the lamp catches the light as well, reflecting the flame in a miniature, trembling image that wavers with each tiny movement of air. You pause on the threshold and simply look. The library feels like a place between worlds, between day and night, between noise and silence, between the busy, heated streets of the city and a cooler, slower current that runs beneath them, constant and undisturbed. The scrolls rest in their shelves, silent but not empty, containing the words and thoughts of people who are no longer here, their voices asleep but not gone. The lamps spread their soft light, merging with the shadows in a partnership that feels harmonious rather than opposed. Your eyes move across the room, and you notice a figure already present, a librarian, or perhaps a scholar who has been granted permission to stay after sundown. The figure is standing near one of the shelves, cloak falling in simple folds around the shoulders. By the light of a nearby lamp, the person holds a scroll partially unrolled, examining it with a calm, steady gaze. The movements are unhurried. When a section has been checked, the hands roll the papyrus back with care, the sound hardly more than a soft rustle. The librarian's presence adds a quiet reassurance to the room. There is no conversation, no need for words. The simple fact of another calm figure moving gently among the shelves makes the library feel less like a museum and more like a living place, a place with routines and habits, even in the depth of night. You sense no tension, no impatience in the librarian's movements, only familiarity, as if this work is as natural as breathing. You step further into the room, and your sandals whisper against the stone floor. As you pass one of the tables, your fingers brush lightly along its edge. The wood is cool and smooth beneath your touch, its grain running in long, gentle lines, interrupted here and there by small knots. For an instant, the lamp's light washes over your hand, warming the skin, then slips away as you move on, leaving the sensation of cool air lingering over the back of your fingers. You feel your shoulders drop another fraction, your jaw easing, your forehead smoothing. The world has shrunk now to stone, wood, papyrus, oil, and flame. The day's questions, the small frictions and worries that clung to you earlier, begin to thin out, like smoke dispersing in open air. Here, there is nothing you must solve, no decision waiting for you. There is only the slow rhythm of the lamps and the shelves and your own steady breath. After a few moments of taking in the room from where you stand, you choose a table and move quietly toward it. This table is near one of the shelves, close enough that you can see the ends of the scrolls resting in their compartments, but far enough that you have a clear space in front of you. The bench here is simple and sturdy. When you sit, it responds with a faint, rounded creak, the sound of wood acknowledging your weight. You settle yourself with care, allowing your body to find a position that feels supported. Your feet rest flat on the stone floor, your knees bent in a comfortable angle. Your hands come to rest on the tabletop for a moment, palms flat, feeling the firmness of the wood. The table is cool against your skin at first, but it gradually warms where you touch it, your own body heat seeping into the surface in a quiet exchange. In front of you, a small collection of scrolls lies in a wooden rack. They have been set aside, perhaps earlier in the day, for consultation. One of them seems to be slightly more forward than the others, its cord tied not too tight, as if it is prepared to be opened again. You reach toward it with a slow, deliberate movement, your fingertips brushing the dry, faintly rough surface of the papyrus. The papyrus feels fragile but not weak, like a dried leaf that still has its structure. You take the scroll gently into your hands, feeling the cylinder of rolled sheets rest in your palms. The weight is modest but real, the weight of thought given physical form. The cord wrapped around the scroll is soft from use, the fibers slightly frayed in places. As you carefully loosen the knot, the cord gives under your fingers with a slight, satisfying resistance, then falls away in a small arc onto the table. You begin to unroll the scroll, only a little, just enough to reveal a portion of the text. The papyrus unfolds with a faint, dry whisper, its outer layers sliding smoothly over those beneath them. The surface that appears is pale, with a subtle, fibrous texture. Ink lines form columns of writing, the characters neatly arranged by the hand of a practiced scribe. The letters are small and regular, each stroke deliberate, each curve shaped with attention. You do not feel any obligation to read the words, to grasp their meaning, not tonight. Instead, your eyes move slowly over the lines as if they are patterns, like waves or branches. You trace the flow of the ink with your gaze, noticing where a line thickened slightly, where the scribe paused and resumed. The meaning of the text rests beneath the surface, but it does not insist on rising. It is enough for now that the words exist, that they were once written with care and now lie quietly before you. The lamp near you flickers, just a little, and you notice the way the light and shadow move across the papyrus. Wherever the flame grows slightly, the ink seems to deepen and darken for an instant. Wherever the flame softens, the writing appears lighter, gentler. The constant yet subtle change makes the text seem alive without disturbing its sleep, as if the thoughts it holds are breathing slowly, in and out, in time with the flame. You rest your forearms on the table beside the scroll. The weight of your arms is comfortable, your shoulders rolling forward slightly, your back relaxing. You let your gaze lift from the text to the shelves along the wall, noticing again how the scrolls are stored. Some are tied with cords in different colors, deep red, faded green, simple undyed fiber. A few have small wooden tags hanging from their cords, each bearing a brief inscription that likely names the text or the author. The tags swing slightly in the faint drafts that move through the room, their tiny movements barely noticeable, like the shifting of leaves in air too gentle to see. The armaria themselves form a solid presence. Their vertical lines rise from floor to ceiling, their horizontal shelves dividing that space into ordered compartments. Tiny imperfections in the wood, small cracks, dark knots, slight warps, add to their character. You can imagine the effort it took to shape them, to assemble them, to install them here, and how, over the years, they have become so much a part of this room that you cannot think of one without the other. Your attention drifts back to the lamp. Its bowl of oil rests on the bronze stand, the wick emerging at a shallow angle, its tip consumed in the small, dancing flame. The pool of oil is dark, almost black, but where the flame hovers above, it gains a soft glow, a translucent halo that shifts gently with each ripple. On the surface of the oil, tiny tremors appear now and then, perhaps from the movement of air, perhaps from the almost imperceptible tremble of the table or of your own breath. The reflections in that thin layer of oil distort and reform, miniature worlds of light collapsing and reappearing with every moment. You become aware of the sound of your breathing again, the steady in and out. At first, you notice it simply as a sensation in your chest and throat, then, gradually, you begin to sense how it matches the rhythm of this place. Inhale, air carries the scent of ink, papyrus, wood, oil. Exhale, your body loosens a little more, your shoulders sinking a fraction, your jaw slackening. The library seems to breathe with you in its own way, the lamps flicker, the shadows move, the faint drafts circulate. Your gaze wanders back to the opposite side of the room, to where the librarian continues their quiet work. The figure has now moved to a different shelf, perhaps checking another set of scrolls. A small ladder rests against the wooden structure, its rungs worn smooth where hands and feet have climbed. The librarian's foot is set on one of these rungs, weight balanced easily, familiar with the ladder's shift and creak. The cloak drapes down, its hem brushing lightly against the lowest shelf. You watch the librarian remove one scroll from a higher compartment, the hands steady and practiced. The scroll is lifted, rotated gently, examined for a moment in the lamplight, then carefully returned. Perhaps the librarian is noting small signs of wear, or checking that everything remains in its proper place. You cannot know, and you do not need to. The movements themselves are soothing, their repetition a kind of silent ritual. For a fleeting moment, the librarian's face turns in your direction. The expression is calm, features softened by the years and by the gentle light. There is no surprise at your presence, only a slight acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance that you are here, sharing this space. Then the gaze returns to the work at hand, the scrolls, the shelves, the lamps. That brief connection, that small recognition, leaves behind a feeling of reassurance, as if the library has formally welcomed you into its night. The lamp nearest you steadies its flame once more, the flickering reducing to a lazy, rhythmic sway. You let your attention rest on that small movement. Each time the flame leans, shadows lengthen for a heartbeat, and each time it straightens, they withdraw. The motion is subtle, trance-like, as if the flame is breathing slowly, inhaling and exhaling light. After some time with the scroll in front of you, your desire to move changes character. It is not restlessness, not a need to leave, but a gentle pull to explore the room more fully, to let your body walk in the same slow rhythm that your thoughts have begun to follow. You carefully roll the scroll back in on itself, guiding the papyrus so that it lies smooth and even. The dry whisper of the roll closing feels like a closing eyelid, or returning to rest. You tie the cord around it with the same loose knot it had before, the fibers touching your fingertips briefly, then lying still. You rise from the bench, your legs supporting you with ease, though perhaps feeling slightly heavier now in the comfortable way that comes from relaxation. The bench makes another soft sound, wood meeting stone in a familiar, low creak. You stand for a moment, adjusting the folds of your garment, letting the sensations in your body resettle, weight shifting from one foot to the other, fabric gliding along your skin, the cool air of the room touching your neck. Then you begin to walk along the outer edge of the room, tracing a wide circle that takes you near each shelf and each column. Your steps are slow, almost deliberate, as if you are walking through water. With each step, you feel the smoothness of the stone beneath your sandals, the subtle change in temperature where shadows deepen or where a lamp's warmth spreads a little further. You linger near one of the taller armaria. Up close, the detail of the wood becomes clearer. You can see fine lines where the boards were joined, the slight differences in color where different pieces met. Small wedges help hold the structure together, driven into place long ago and still performing their quiet task. The scrolls resting within are arranged in thoughtful patterns, some grouped closely, others spaced with a little more air between them, as if to give them room to breathe. Near the center of one shelf, you notice a knob of darker wood where a knot once sat in the grain. Time has polished it so that it gleams slightly, a small, natural ornament in the middle of the otherwise regular surface. Your fingers hover near it, not quite touching, as if acknowledging its presence. Everything here, from the smallest knot to the largest shelf, seems to carry a history of touch, of use, of being part of countless quiet nights like this one. You move on, your hands now resting lightly at your sides. As you pass one of the columns, you trail the back of your hand along its surface. The stone is cool and faintly rough, with shallow grooves that hint at the marks left by tools when the column was carved. The column feels deeply rooted, rising solidly from the floor to the ceiling, joining the space above and below. When you withdraw your hand, a slight chill remains on your skin, then fades. At one side of the room, in a slightly recessed section of wall, you see a small niche that you only glimpsed earlier from a distance. Now, as you approach, the oil lamp within it becomes clearer, along with the figure it illuminates. A small statue stands upon a short pedestal, carved from pale stone that seems almost luminescent in the lamplight. The figure is modest in height, perhaps no more than the length of your arm, but the presence it carries feels larger. Its features are gently carved, not harsh or overly detailed. The face is serene, the eyes set in a gaze that looks outward without pressing, as if seeing beyond the room and yet at the same time fully present within it. The hands and arms are positioned in a way that suggests steady calm, a gesture that might represent blessing or simple presence, depending on how you feel when you look at it. At the base of the statue, on the pedestal, the lamp's flame rises from a small clay bowl. Its light climbs upward over the stone figure, picking out its contours, tracing gentle shadows in the folds of the carved garment. The flame itself is steady, its brightness softened slightly by the bowl's rim, so that the glow on the statue feels diffused, like a quiet halo. You notice small offerings placed on the pedestal. A few grains of incense turn to pale ash, still holding their shape as tiny grains but now colorless. A sprig of dried herb, shriveled and light, its leaves curled inward on themselves. Perhaps a coin, its surface dulled by time, resting among the ashes and the dried plant. These offerings are simple, unassuming, yet they speak of the respect and gratitude others have brought to this niche. They lie undisturbed, protected by the quiet of the room. Standing before the statue, you feel an ease that does not come from any particular thought. It is more like a soft reassurance that flows subtly from the presence of this figure and its steady lamp. You let your eyes follow the light as it moves across the stone, over the forehead, down the cheeks, along the shoulders, across the hands. Sometimes the shadow deepens at an angle, making a feature seem more pronounced, sometimes the light shifts, and the same feature appears softer, almost smoothed away. In that shifting interplay of light and shadow, you sense the passing of time in miniature, as if the statue has seen many nights like this one, many lamps, many shadows, and has accepted them all without resistance. It stands, and watches, and continues, regardless of the changes that pass around it. You remain there for a while, breathing in the faint scent of the lamp oil and the ghost of incense. Your breath falls into an easy pattern again, slow inhale, slow exhale, each cycle slightly longer than the last. There is no pressure to do anything, to think anything. You simply share space with the statue, the lamp, and the quiet air. Eventually, you turn and move toward a smaller doorway at the side of the main room. You know that beyond it lies another space, a more focused, work-oriented one, a scriptorium, where scribes sometimes spend their days copying texts, maintaining the life of the library's words. Tonight, the day's labor is finished, but the room itself remains, holding its own particular atmosphere. The doorway is lower than the main arch and slightly narrower, framed by plain stone. As you step through, the light of the main room dims behind you, and the light of the scriptorium takes its place ahead, a single, softer glow that bleeds into the corridor leading into the room. Your footsteps sound slightly different here, closer together, the walls capturing the faint echoes and holding them for a moment before letting them fade. The scriptorium is modest in size, long and somewhat narrow. Lamplight spills from a single burning lamp near one of the tables, leaving the rest of the room in a comfortable dimness. The lamp's glow is golden and low, as though it too is aware that the work of the day is over and that its role now is not to illuminate labor, but to keep watch over rest. Two long wooden tables run along the length of the room, parallel to each other, their surfaces bearing the signs of many days of use. You can see small nicks where styluses might have pressed too firmly, faint ink stains where drops fell and dried, lighter patches where scrolls have often been laid. The tables are sturdy, their edges rounded by the constant contact of hands and arms. On the table nearest the lamp, a half-copied scroll lies open. One section of the papyrus is covered in neat writing, the next is blank, waiting. The boundary between inked and uninked portions is a simple line, but it feels like a pause in a sentence, a breath taken by the scribe before continuing on another day. The inked characters look slightly glossy in the lamplight, especially where the strokes are thicker, while the blank section reflects the light more evenly, showing its papyrus texture without interruption. Near the scroll, a small tray holds several reed pens. Their tips are cut at different angles, some sharper, some broader, each suited to a particular style of writing or thickness of line. The reeds are lightweight, their surfaces smooth where they have been cleaned and handled, faint lines on them revealing where they grew. In the lamp's glow, they cast slender shadows on the table, thin and elongated. A small jar that once held ink stands nearby, its mouth dark and still. The inside is obscured by shadow, but you sense the residue of ink clinging to its walls, a ring at the level where it was most often filled. By the jar lies a folded cloth, its surface stained with long-ago ink, used to wipe the reeds and keep their tips clean. The cloth's fibers are worn down in places, smoother where they have been gripped tightly, frayed at the edges where time has loosened the threads. The air in the scriptorium carries a slightly different scent from the main room. The smell of ink is more present here, though now it too is at rest, subdued and mingling softly with the familiar odors of papyrus and wood. There is also a faint waxy aroma, perhaps from candles that were once burned here or from the wax seals pressed onto some documents. It is the smell of careful work, of hours spent in concentration, now settled into a peaceful stillness. You walk further into the room, your fingers reaching toward an empty section of the table. When you touch the wood, you can feel the shallow grooves left by years of writing, tiny valleys where styluses have moved back and forth. The surface is not perfectly smooth, but it is not rough either. Your fingers glide over it easily, feeling each small indentation as a soft variation in texture. You imagine the scribes who sit here during the day, leaning over their work in silence or soft conversation, ink staining their fingertips, wax tablets stacked nearby. You picture them dipping reeds into ink, bringing the tips to the papyrus, drawing lines that turn into letters, letters that form words, words that capture thoughts from distant minds. Those minds do not need to be present for their words to continue moving, to continue resting, here in this room. Your attention drifts to a narrow window set high in the wall. From outside, a sliver of the night sky peers in, a small rectangle of dark blue speckled with a few faint stars. Through this window, a whisper of cooler air enters the room, descending along the wall, carrying with it the distant scent of the city outside, stone cooling in the night, perhaps a faint trace of smoke from a dying fire, the quiet breath of streets emptying of people. The starry patch framed by the window is calm. No clouds drift across it from this vantage point, only the slow, almost imperceptible turning of the sky itself, which you cannot see but can feel if you imagine the stars very slowly changing their positions over the hours. The contrast between this cool, distant light and the warm, close lamplight below creates a gentle tension that is soothing rather than sharp, a meeting of two different kinds of night. You stand in that place between lamp and window, feeling the slight currents of air that move through the room. The cooler air from outside brushes lightly over your face and hands, while the warmer air near the lamp touches your skin like a soft exhale. Between the two, you find a balance, your body adjusting in small ways that need no conscious direction. Your thoughts become softer here, less structured. Images rise and fall without insistence, hands clearing a table at the end of the day, a reed pen set carefully back in its tray, a scribe blowing gently on ink to help it dry, the sound of a chair being pushed back, of footsteps leaving the room as the sun begins to sink. None of these moments need to be fully formed, they simply flicker briefly in your mind and then fade, like sparks from a slowly dying fire. You look once more at the half-finished scroll on the table. You do not need to move closer to sense that the work on it will continue another time, that the hands that began these lines will return and pick up where they left off. The text is patient. It does not protest being left incomplete for a night. It waits, as everything else in this building waits, in quietness, in trust, in the gentle continuity that stretches from day to night and back to day again. Standing there, with the soft lamplight at your side and the cool square of sky above, you feel your own breathing deepen again. Inhale, with a hint of ink and papyrus in the air. Exhale, feeling the muscles of your back relax, your neck soften, the weight of your head settling comfortably on your shoulders. The scriptorium, with all its tools and traces of labor, has joined the rest of the library in rest, and you have joined it in turn. Not long after, a quiet inclination grows in you to return to the main reading room, to the wider space where shelves and tables and lamps all share their subdued glow. You turn toward the doorway, your feet finding their way along the path they took earlier, this time even more familiar, even more gentle. As you step back into the corridor that connects the scriptorium to the central room, the light shifts around you once again, the single lamp behind you receding into the background, the multiple lamps ahead drawing you toward their overlapping circles of gold, as the quiet night in the library continues to deepen and unfold. When you step through the archway and re-enter the main reading room, it feels as though you are returning to a familiar, softly breathing body of light and shadow. The scriptorium's single lamp, with its focused, work-like glow, gives way to the more diffused radiance of several lamps scattered throughout the larger space. Their circles of light overlap and melt into one another, forming a patchwork of gentle brightness that leaves some areas almost luminous and others tucked into velvety dimness. The room appears largely unchanged, as if time here has barely moved. The columns still rise, pale and steady, into the half-seen ceiling. The shelves still hold their rows of resting scrolls, untouched and unhurried. The faint smell of ink in your memory from the scriptorium fades back into the more familiar bouquet of this central space, papyrus dry and fibrous, aged wood, lamp oil, a suggestion of long-gone incense. The librarian is no longer high on the ladder. Instead, the figure is seated at a table near the center of the room, close to a lamp whose flame is steady and clear. A wax tablet lies on the table, stylus in hand, as the librarian leans slightly forward in a posture of easy concentration. The movements of the stylus are slow and precise, barely audible against the wax, more a faint rasp than a scratch. The light pools over the tablet, catching on the raised edges of inscribed lines, leaving the lower, smoothed areas in softer shade. You walk quietly toward another table, choosing one close to a wall where the light is not too strong, where it has already spread itself thin by the time it reaches the plaster. The bench here feels familiar, as if it remembers you from earlier in the evening. When you sit, the wood welcomes your weight with a subdued creak, then rests again. You let your hands fall gently into your lap or onto the table, palms loose, fingers naturally curved. From this vantage point, you can see a portion of the wall where faint traces of decorative painting remain. The original colors have faded over time, but hints of muted reds, browns, and perhaps a greenish hue still cling to the plaster. The patterns are simple, a border of small shapes, maybe leaves or abstract motifs, running in a band along the wall. In some places, the paint has flaked away completely, leaving irregular gaps that reveal the pale plaster beneath. In others, it has stayed, though it has softened into shades that no longer shout, only murmur. The lamplight touches these remaining fragments of paint delicately, sliding over them and making certain lines more visible for a moment before leaving them again. When the flame shifts, a particular curl of pattern catches your eye. When it steadies, that curl fades back into the general texture of the wall. This slow, constant change has no urgency. It is more like the gentle, almost imperceptible drifting of clouds in a distant sky. Your attention settles on a small, irregular patch of plaster where tiny cracks have formed, radiating outward like thin branches or veins. They are so fine that from a distance you might not notice them at all, but at this closer range, they become an intricate map of time's passage. The cracks do not threaten the wall, they simply record the subtle movements of stone and air, the expansions and contractions of seasons, the quiet adjustments of a building that has been standing for many years. You sit and watch for a while, your eyes moving slowly along the painted band, tracing its shapes, then following the cracks, then returning to the areas where the plaster is smoother. It does not matter what you focus on specifically, the act of watching itself becomes soothing, a gentle occupation for your mind that demands nothing more than your presence. As you sit there, thoughts begin to drift in a way that feels different from the kind of drifting that happens in a busy day. These are not thoughts that call you to action, that insist you remember or plan. They are more like soft impressions, passing images. You think of the city outside, the streets that have grown quieter. You imagine torches being extinguished, doors being closed, cloaks wrapped more tightly around shoulders as people move indoors. The city itself seems to be folding into rest. At the same time, you sense how the library stands as a small, steady enclave within that city, a place where the night is welcomed in a particular way. Here, the darkness is not simply an absence of light, it is a partner to the lamps, filling the spaces they do not reach, cushioning their glow. Lamp and shadow together create the room's shape, making some things visible and allowing others to recede in a gentle, protective obscurity. Your breath continues in its slow course, in and out, in and out. You can feel your ribs lift slightly with each inhale, the fabric over your chest stretching just a little, then relaxing as you exhale. The air enters cool, leaves slightly warmer, having been held for a moment in your lungs. After a while, your breathing pattern seems to mesh with the quiet patterns of the room, your exhale aligning with the slight sway of a lamp's flame, your inhale arriving as the shadows settle again. After some unhurried time seated at the table, a new subtle urge arises within you, again, not a restlessness, but a desire to feel the air under the open sky. You remember the small interior courtyard connected to this room, the pocket of outside world enclosed within the library's walls. The thought of its quiet fountain and framed sky drifts up, like a gentle invitation. You stand, your body now moving with almost dreamlike slowness, and make your way toward the side door that leads to the courtyard. The door is slightly ajar, its bar drawn back, leaving a narrow gap through which cooler air already slips into the reading room, carrying with it a different scent, less papyrus and wood, more stone and faint greenery and night. You place your hand on the edge of the door and push it open just enough to pass through. The wood moves with a smooth reluctance, its hinges offering a soft, low sound that barely registers in the quiet. As the door swings, the temperature changes almost immediately. A wave of cool air washes over you, brushing your face and hands, curling around your neck and shoulders. It is not cold enough to bite, instead, it feels refreshing, like a cloth dipped in cool water and wrung out, laid gently over warm skin. The courtyard reveals itself in front of you, not large, but harmonious in its proportion. Stone walls enclose it on all sides, their surfaces pale in the faint night light. Above, the open sky stretches in a dark rectangle, with more stars visible here than in the street beyond, as if the walls frame them and draw them closer. The air is still, with only the smallest movement stirred by the fountain at the courtyard center. You walk toward that fountain, drawn by its sound. It is a simple structure, a low basin made of stone, worn at the edges where hands have rested and water has splashed. From a small spout set into the wall above the basin, a thin stream of water falls. During the day, it may run more brightly, catching sunlight. Now, in the night, it flows like a dark thread, visible mainly by the way it breaks the surface of the basin below. The impact of the falling water creates a pattern of ripples that radiate outward, overlapping and merging in slow, continuous cycles. The sound they make is soft and repetitive, a liquid whisper that fills the silence of the courtyard without disturbing it. Each drop joins the pool, and each small splash becomes part of a single, ongoing murmuring. You stand at the edge of the basin and rest your hands lightly on the rim. The stone is cool and slightly damp beneath your palms, the moisture having gathered there from small droplets and from the fine mist that occasionally rises when the stream breaks on the water's surface. The stone's texture is uneven, smooth in some places where water has flowed for years, rougher in others where the chisel marks from its shaping remain more distinct. You look down into the basin. The water is dark, reflecting a faint image of the sky above and the outlines of the walls around you. The stars are there, but fractured and multiplied in the moving surface, each ripple bending their reflections into new shapes. When the water settles for a heartbeat, the stars seem to float still and clear within the basin. When a new drop falls and the surface trembles, they waver, stretch, and then slowly find their way back to their original, steadier forms. The air here bears the scent of damp stone and water that has had time to settle and become familiar with its surroundings. There is also the faint smell of plant life. Along the walls, small planters or narrow beds hold a few herbs and shrubs, modest plants that can thrive in partial light, their leaves dark against the stone. Even at night, you can sense their presence, if not their precise forms, by the soft, green scent that mingles with the mineral smell of the courtyard. You tilt your head back and look up at the framed sky. It feels both open and protected. The walls rise around it, creating a sense of shelter, yet they do not block the view. The stars seem to hang closer, though in truth they are as far away as ever. You might catch a faint hint of a breeze passing high above, moving the thin traces of cloud you can just barely make out against the dark. For a while, you simply stand there between sky and stone, between the water's murmur and the quiet of the walls. Your breathing falls naturally into rhythm with the drops hitting the basin. Inhale as one drop falls, exhale as the ripples spread. Or perhaps it is the other way around. The precise order does not matter, what matters is that the patterns meet and support each other. Your thoughts grow even more diffuse. They no longer have the shape of sentences, but the softer shape of sensations and images, the curve of the basin, the glimmer of stars in water, the coolness of stone under your hands, the steady repetition of the fountain's voice. There is something deeply reassuring in that repetition, in the way each drop follows the one before it, in the way the ripples always return to calm. In time, you move away from the fountain and sit down on a low stone bench that runs along one side of the courtyard. The bench is simple, cut from the same kind of stone as the walls and basin, its surface worn smooth by use. When you sit, you feel the initial coolness of the stone beneath you, seeping through the fabric of your clothing, then slowly accepting your warmth, becoming neutral, a comfortable support. You lean your back gently against the wall, feeling its solidity. The wall meets you with a firm, unyielding presence that is nonetheless comforting. Your weight rests more completely now, not held entirely by your muscles but shared with the stone. Your arms come to rest in your lap, hands may be loosely folded, your fingers relaxing so that they no longer hold any tension. With your body thus supported, you close your eyes for a moment. When you do, the courtyard becomes a collection of sounds and subtle sensations. The fountain continues its soft murmur, unbroken. The air brushes your face with delicate, shifting coolness. You might hear a faint scrape of some distant object being moved in another part of the building, or a whisper of wind slipping somewhere along the outer walls. All these sounds are quiet, spaced far apart, like words spoken slowly and gently. Behind your closed eyelids, the afterimage of the stars and the basin and the stone remains. You can still see, in your mind's eye, the way the reflections moved, the way the walls rose around the sky. But those images are no longer sharply defined. They soften, blending into each other the way colors sometimes mix at the edges of a fresco. They become a backdrop against which your sense of your own body's stillness grows clearer. When you open your eyes again, nothing has changed, and yet everything feels a little more tranquil. The stars still shine in their places, the water still falls, the plants still stand quiet in their beds. It is as if the courtyard has accepted you fully into its rhythm, as if your breath and heartbeat have been gently folded into the ongoing patterns of this enclosed piece of night. After sitting for a while, you gradually become aware once more of the light from the library spilling through the doorway. From here, it looks softer than from the inside looking out, warmer against the darker courtyard, like the glow of hearth fires seen from a distance. It reminds you that beyond this cool pocket of stone and sky, the shelves and scrolls and lamps still wait, steady and unchanged. You rise from the bench with slow, measured movements. Your body feels a little heavier now in a comfortable way, as though the stone has shared some of its solidity with you. You walk back toward the doorway, passing once more beside the fountain, the basin's edge briefly brushing your fingertips as you go. The sound of the water remains behind you, but its presence seems to follow you too, lingering in your awareness. Crossing the threshold back into the reading room, you feel the air change again. The drier, warmer atmosphere of the interior wraps around you once more, bringing with it the familiar scent of papyrus and oil. The door settles behind you, not fully closed, perhaps, but enough to soften the sound of the fountain into a more distant whisper. Inside, the lamps have burned a little lower. Their flames are slightly smaller, their light richer and more golden. Shadows have deepened in the corners and along the high parts of the walls. The columns seem to emerge from the dimness now rather than stand fully illuminated. The library feels not darker in a threatening way, but more cocooned, more intimate, as the night thickens gently around it. The librarian is still present, though perhaps now engaged in a quieter phase of the evening's tasks. The wax tablet may be set aside, the stylus resting at its edge. The librarian's posture is relaxed, shoulders no longer bent over writing, hands perhaps folded loosely or occupied with a small, simple task, such as adjusting a lamp or straightening a scroll. You move back toward the table where your first scroll still lies, tied neatly as you left it. The sight of it, undisturbed, offers a subtle comfort, a reminder that the library's contents do not hurry or change simply because time has passed. You rest your hand gently on the scroll, feeling once again the dry texture of the papyrus beneath the cord. You do not feel the need to unroll it again. The knowledge inside it remains, whether or not you look at it tonight. Around you, the library seems to breathe in a slow, steady rhythm. The faint currents of air from the courtyard door mix with the warmth from the lamps. The shadows grow and shrink in small, nearly unnoticeable ways as the flames move. The shelves stand motionless, yet somehow alive, like trees in a forest at night, rooted and quiet, hosting life within their stillness. You feel drawn to walk along the shelves once more, to trace again the path you took earlier. But with even more softness in your step. Rising from the bench, you move along the outer wall of the room, your hand hovering near the rows of scrolls. This time, you pay attention not only to what you see, but to the subtle sensation of air around your fingers, the tiny changes in temperature as you pass close to the shelves, the way the dry air near the papyrus feels slightly different from the air near the open parts of the room. You pause at one of the tall armaria and let your eyes wander over the scroll ends. Each scroll has its own slight hue, from pale cream to deeper tan, depending on the papyrus and the age and the light it has seen. Some ends are a little frayed at the very edges, others remain more tightly wound, their surfaces smoother. Together, they form an irregular pattern of circles and ovals, a quiet geometry of rest. You imagine, for a brief moment, all the hours of reading and copying and discussing that these scrolls have witnessed. Philosophers, historians, poets, scribes, students, all passing through this space in different times, in different clothes, with different worries and hopes. Without conjuring any specific scene, you feel the cumulative weight of their presence, now settled into the shelves, not as pressure but as a kind of gentle depth. Your steps carry you toward a small wooden box resting on a low shelf, filled with wax tablets. You pick one up, cradling it in your hands. The wooden frame feels smooth and solid, its edges rounded to fit comfortably against the curve of a palm. The wax within the frame is dark and slightly glossy, with faint, softened impressions from earlier writing. Someone has smoothed the wax at some point, perhaps with a straight edge or with the back of a stylus, but traces remain, shadows of lines, hints of letters that have almost completely disappeared. You slowly tilt the tablet, letting the nearest lamp's light slide across the wax. As the angle changes, the faint marks become visible, then vanish, then appear again in new combinations. It is as if the wax holds memories that it is not quite ready to let go of, even after being erased. Those memories are not accessible in any clear way, yet their presence is soothing. The tablet has been used and reused, over and over, bearing notes that were important for a time and then no longer needed, and it has accepted this cycle without resistance. You set the tablet carefully back in its box, the wooden edges tapping lightly against the others. The sound is soft but distinct, like a small, gentle punctuation mark in the room's general quiet. It reminds you that many objects here have their own tiny voices, their own sounds in motion, scrolls rustling, shelves creaking, lamps crackling, that all together create the library's quiet music. Your steps bring you once again toward the niche with the statue. The lamp there has burned a little lower, its flame smaller but still steady. The stone face of the figure remains serene, untroubled by the passing of hours. With the reduced light, the features appear even smoother, their details softened, as if the night itself has laid a thin veil over the carving. You notice now, perhaps more clearly than before, a thin crack running across one of the statue's shoulders, a delicate line that has formed over decades, maybe centuries. It does not disrupt the figure's integrity, instead, it adds to the sense of time that the statue carries. This object has watched many nights like this one, many readers, many librarians, many scrolls moved and returned. Each small crack, each worn edge, is an honest mark of endurance. Standing there, you let the warmth from the lamp touch your hands and face. The light spills over the stone and onto your skin, creating a tiny island of more intense warmth in the cooler air of the room. Your eyes might close for a moment as you stand so close, the brightness against your eyelids turning the darkness behind them into a soft, reddish glow. When you open them again, the statue's face is calm and familiar, as if it has not changed at all while your eyes were shut. After another unmeasured stretch of time, you return to one of the central tables and sit again. Perhaps this time choosing a place where you can lean a little more comfortably. You feel the bench offer its steady support, feel the table waiting in front of you. You rest your forearms or elbows on the tabletop, your hands loose, your fingers relaxed. The wood is no longer as cool as when you first arrived, it has warmed slightly from your earlier touch and from the ambient heat of the room. The lamp on this table has burned steadily all evening. Now its flame is modest, quiet, its brightness just enough to illuminate the objects within a small circle around it, your hands, part of the table, an edge of the bench, a nearby scroll. Beyond that circle, the room recedes into softer and softer tones, shapes blending gradually into shadow. You can sense the shelves and columns and doors, but they no longer demand to be clearly seen. You let your eyes half close, leaving only a narrow gap through which the lamplight can reach you. In this slightly blurred view, the edges of objects soften further. The flame becomes an elongated glow, the table's edge a hazy line, the shelves indistinct vertical forms. It becomes easier for your gaze to rest on something without examining it, to simply accept that it is there. Your thoughts follow suit, losing their sharp edges. Instead of formed ideas, you have sensations, warmth on your hands from the lamp, coolness on the back of your neck from a faint current of air, the weight of your body on the bench. You become more aware of these things than of any concept or memory, as if the present moment has gently expanded to fill all available space. The librarian's footsteps cross the room, unhurried and light. You hear them approach one of the lamps on the wall. There is a subtle clink as the lamp is lifted from its bracket, a soft movement as it is examined. Perhaps the wick is adjusted, or the oil is checked. The flame flares slightly, then steadies, then perhaps is taken down a little, reduced to a smaller, more sustainable size. These actions are carried out with such ease and care that each tiny sound blends into the room's ongoing whisper. The footsteps move on, visiting another lamp, and then another. In some places, the light grows a little dimmer after the librarian's attention passes, in others, it becomes steadier, less flickering. Overall, the effect is of a gradual softening, as if the room is being gently prepared for deeper night, for a time when less light will be needed and more shadow will be welcome. When the librarian comes near your table, you sense the presence closely, the almost imperceptible warmth of another person standing nearby, the soft sound of fabric as the cloak shifts. The hand that reaches for your lamp is careful, its movements practiced. The flame is watched, perhaps trimmed slightly. It steadies, becomes a little smaller, but also more even, its sway reduced to a slow, soothing pulse. No words are exchanged. None are needed. The librarian moves on, leaving behind a lamp that now seems particularly well suited to this late hour, bright enough to hold the room in a comforting glow, but not so bright as to demand wakefulness or attention. Your eyes close completely now, more often and for longer. Behind your eyelids, you still see the impression of light, a soft warmth that lingers. The shapes of the room rearrange themselves into a kind of inner map that you no longer need to consciously hold. You know where the shelves are, where the statue stands, where the courtyard door lies, where the scriptorium waits. They exist within you like remembered rooms in a familiar house. Your breathing deepens, your chest rising and falling more slowly. At the end of each exhale, there is a moment, a small pause, where nothing happens, where your body simply rests without drawing in new air. In that pause, a profound stillness opens up, as if everything, both within you and around you, is holding its breath together. Then the next inhale arrives, calm and unforced, filling your lungs again, and the cycle continues. The small sounds of the library become more distant but also more comforting. The soft crackle of a lamp wick here and there, the faint shift of wood as the shelves adjust to the cooling air. The barely audible sigh of the building itself as it rests into its foundations. Each sound is gentle, small, spaced out in time. Between them, long stretches of quiet unfold. In your mind, images continue to drift, but now they are even lighter, less defined. You see perhaps the suggestion of a column, not its full shape. The ghost of a scroll unrolling, but without text. A lamp's glow appearing as a diffuse halo, without clear edges. A fountain made of sound rather than stone. These images overlap and dissolve at their edges, flowing into one another in a way that feels very much like the first stage of dreaming. You are aware, in a subtle way, that the lamps will eventually burn lower, that the librarian will perhaps extinguish some of them before leaving, that the room will sink further into shadow until only the faintest glimmers remain. But this awareness does not trouble you. It is more like a knowledge that the night has its own path to follow, independent of whether you witness each step. You know that the library will continue to exist in its quiet completeness whether your eyes are open or closed. At some point, you might adjust your position on the bench, seeking even greater comfort. Perhaps you let your arms fold on the tabletop and rest your head on them, turning your face slightly so that one cheek feels the cool, faintly textured wood. Perhaps you lean back and let your head rest against the wall or the back of the bench, your neck muscles releasing their last bits of tension. However you settle, your body knows what it needs and finds it without effort. The line between waking and sleep grows thinner, more flexible. Your awareness hovers in a gentle in-between state, in which the library is both vividly present and already becoming part of a dream. The shelves and scrolls, the statue and the fountain, the scriptorium and its tools, they all continue to exist in your inner landscape, but their edges soften, their details blur into a harmonious whole. You feel held, both by the bench beneath you and by the larger embrace of the building. The thick stone walls stand guard around you, keeping out the harsher elements of the outside world. The lamps inside have formed a small constellation of warmth and light that has guided you through the night. The courtyard has given you sky and water. The scriptorium has shown you the tools of thought. The statue has offered its silent companionship. All of these things now gather around you in an intangible way, like a blanket of impressions laid gently over your resting mind. Your breathing is calm, steady. Your body is heavy in a pleasant way, as if sinking into a soft bed. Your thoughts have slowed to almost nothing, reduced to a few lingering sensations: warmth, safety, stillness. The library's quiet has become your quiet, its slow rhythms now mirrored in your own. In this deepening hush, you may sense the librarian moving further away, perhaps toward a distant corner or toward another room, their footsteps growing fainter. The lamps are left in their careful arrangement, some perhaps dimmed more than others, all of them entrusted to burn out in their own time. The night surrounds the building like a vast, soft cloak, and the building in turn surrounds you. Your last distinct impressions before sleep claim you fully might be very simple ones: the glow of a lamp seen through barely open eyes, the coolness of stone against your feet, the gentle pressure of the bench supporting your back and legs, the remembered sound of water in the courtyard. Each of these impressions is like a thread, and together they weave a fabric strong enough to carry you into dreams. Soon, even these impressions fade, replaced by the quieter, deeper darkness of true rest. You are no longer separate from the library's calm, no longer a visitor moving through its spaces. You have become part of its stillness, part of its night. Outside, the stars continue their slow, invisible turning above the city. Within the thick walls, the scrolls continue to rest, their words sleeping in their rolls. The statue continues its watch. The fountain continues its steady murmuring. The lamps continue to burn down. Their flames shrinking, their oil consumed, until all that remains are faint, cooling wicks and the thin scent of smoke lingering for a short while in the air. And you, here in this Roman library at night, surrounded by stone and wood and silent words, wrapped in the gentle glow of the last surviving lamps and the deep, protective darkness between them, breathe softly, evenly, peacefully, as you drift further and further from the waking world, carried by the library's quiet embrace into long, unbroken, and nourishing sleep.